Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
associated with the creation
or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked
and sometimes what didn't.
You will also hear very personal experiences
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
and inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode.
Hi, I'm Gayatri Kalyanaraman. I'm speaking with Deeksha Senguttuvan today, who's a founder and CEO of BabyMD, which focuses on small children. And she's also an executive trustee of a firm that's focused on raising funds for Pediatric Cancer Foundation. Deeksha shares her authentic self around her stories of personal transformation, entrepreneurial grit, and unwavering compassion for children's health. She shares about how she pivoted to healthcare due to circumstances that had presented, and she describes herself as someone who's never had a fixed plan but followed what made sense at the moment. You will be inspired by how well she has done fundraising for her firm as well as for her trust. And she talks about digital transformation at a very popular hospital. And she shares about how one can build their authentic self being an entrepreneur. And she recommends the book Range by David Epstein. Listen on. Hi, Deeksha. Welcome to Software People Stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Deeksha, I know you as my fellow alumni from NIT Trichy, as well as my close friend's niece also.
Yes.
But how would you introduce yourself to our listeners?
I would introduce myself as a person who sort of doesn't have a plan and who goes behind what seems to make sense at that time. So I think I finished my engineering from NIT, of course. But immediately realized that chemical engineering, which is what I specialized in, was not the path for me, and sort of went into a MBA direction because that is what felt right. And then went into a corporate career with the Tata Group, was in marketing, and then did product management before then completely pivoting and sort of jumping into healthcare. This was during the time of COVID, and I felt that was an appropriate time to get into it. And so right now I'm pursuing my own venture. I run a company called BabyMD, and I'm building it for the last 1 year, focusing on children's health. So if you looked at my situation 10 years back, if you had asked me if this is what I would have been doing now, I would no idea. So that's me.
Excellent, Deeksha. So it's an amazing career profile in terms of starting as an engineer, product head, and getting your first MBA in Kozhikode, IIM Kozhikode, right?
Yes.
So I'll probably ask your initial, product management experience and being part of the software industry, helping the industry itself. How was that career graph? Any interesting stories there?
Yeah, like I said, I was a chemical engineer by training, right? IT is not something, I think the last time I learned like anything to do with IT or technology about, computers was in my computer science course in my 12th standard. That was literally my last one. And then it was chemical engineering, which had absolutely no relation to IT. And then it was MBA. And even after that was like marketing for a couple of years. But for me, how the journey happened was just this ability to do whatever is needed, right? Like that sort of adaptability and flexibility has characterized my journey throughout. And I was part of the Tata Administrative Services program, which is essentially this, right? Like they expect leaders and managers to be put in very different situations, which may not be their core skill set. But when Mr. Tata, J.R.D. Tata started this program, he believed that sort of this cross-functional, cross-business exposure is what creates the right leaders. And the ability to quickly understand something and contribute to it he felt was a mark of a key leader. Because not always will you have an expertise in that particular domain that you step into, but how quickly do you understand the nuances of it, and how quickly are you able to make a difference is what was important. So when I joined, I literally had to buy books that defined what was cloud, what was CPU and storage, and SD-RAM, and what does HDD mean, and what does SD mean, and standard disk, and your this thing. So I had to start from scratch to understand the industry that I was getting into, because I was working with developers, engineering developers, and I was working with sales folks on the other side who were completely non-technical, right? Like their business was to sell cloud, network, across all of it. So they don't understand the tech completely. And on the other side, I had all these engineers and the service delivery folks who are way deep into tech. With regards to, I had to understand what a VM was, and I didn't know what virtual machines were. And I had to go negotiate with vendors, right? Like if I had to buy a storage device, I had to know the difference between Nutanix and someone else. And I had to go to Dell and say, you know what, Huawei is giving me at this rate, and so you have to give me your machines at this rate. So it was a very fast, rapid learning stage, but it was also like the more challenging it became, I think I learned a lot. It was literally like running my own business, right? Like I was head of that product for my region. So I was heading, cloud products for that region. So, you had different nuances. You had private cloud and public cloud, and you had managed public cloud, and you had in private cloud as well. Sometimes you just had managed hosting services and not a cloud service, right? And then you had like just general data center space, selling of data center space. So there was a portfolio of services and products that I was sort of owning, and I had to give inputs to the engineers on what is being seen in the market, and so what should they develop, right, in terms of the experience. Oh, how fast can you create a VM once a person asks? What are the standard configurations of VM, like how much CPU, how much storage, and how much RAM do you need to have, etc. So I think it was I think the question was any interesting story. I think I rambled a lot about the overall thing, but I think me entering into leading a cloud product as a division itself was a very interesting thing to happen. That was my experience dealing with that.
Such a wonderful way to look at how person looks at technology from an outside-in perspective. Yeah. And you also led the digital transformation for Kaveri Hospital. For those who don't know, Kaveri Hospital, it's one of the transformative hospitals, transformed hospitals in itself. Anyone who had used this, their services in the last couple of years. How was that? How did that career came about? When you were in the hardcore business of, in the other side of the whole thing, and then coming back to a really hospital and services, how did that come out?
Yeah, actually, that was I think my personal journey impacted a lot of my career decisions. So I actually went through a divorce in 2018, which is when I took up the entire cloud product role. And so while I was doing the role and I was enjoying the role, I think there was a point in time when I was searching for more meaning in life. My father is a pediatrician and he's a doctor, and he's associated with Kaveri Hospital. And so I started involving more with his patients and the work there. We started a trust called TMRT Trust, which focused on funding the treatment cost for children with cancer. So this is something I started in 2019. And that was the time my father recruited a pediatric oncologist to come practice in Trichy. He was a AIMS-trained doctor, high profile, but my father convinced him to come to Trichy because for the entire south of Tamil Nadu, there was no, tertiary quaternary care center treating them. Anyone had to always go to either CMC Vellore or to the Chennai Cancer Institute. And so there was no specialty treatment for oncology. And pediatric oncology is something that's not even that unaffordable, right? Like a treatment cost plus like a stay, etc. cost of 3 to 4 lakhs is enough to set you for life. And there is a 98% cure rate in pediatric cancer, right? If children at the age of 2 and 3, when they come for like oncology treatments, they can actually be fully treated and they have their entire life in front of them. And I saw situations where people, because they couldn't afford those 3-4 lakhs, right, which for a lot of people I knew was their monthly salary, right? So when that was happening and people were not taking treatment because of that, and you wouldn't believe, I had cases where because it was a daughter, right? The father and his family said, I'm not spending money on trying to treat a daughter. If this is her reality, let it be. We will try to get pregnant again for a son.
Wow.
Yeah.
This day age, is it? My goodness.
At this day and age. And so the mother left with her daughter and she said, how can I leave my child? Even if it's my daughter, it's my child. And so she's trying to come and make ends meet in Trichy. She's trying to, she's staying in a hostel and she's trying to figure out like ways of making revenue to, pay for this. And so that was the time I felt, wow, like, we have a lot of people who want to make an impact, and making a difference for a child whose entire life is ahead of them was something that was super meaningful. So that was how I entered into healthcare, by trying to address the need of such patients. And as I went more into it, I found out that being in healthcare gave me so much more satisfaction in terms of making a difference in people's lives. And at that, personal journey level, I was really looking for a change. Corporate career didn't just motivate me enough anymore. And so I felt I needed to be in an industry where my work actually makes a difference for people. And correctly, when COVID hit, given my experience in driving technology related initiatives, working in digital marketing before and then cloud product and everything, Kaveri Hospital, the MD felt that that was a good time to come and set up an entire digital strategy function, because hospitals as an industry, they were the least exposed to technology, right? They were mostly created by doctors, run by doctors. There was a high orientation towards medical care to be the best, but the experience and the technology that can enable that was always sort of, pushed to the back seat. And so during COVID, everyone realized that, I cannot deliver my care. People cannot come to the hospital and, I have to deliver it digitally. And so the need for a digital transformation was acutely felt. And I also wanted to enter into the healthcare industry. So that's how then we figured, it'll be a right time for an outsider like me to come into healthcare and figure out what all the, areas that technology can actually drive or enable. And so I set up a digital strategy function from scratch. And 5 years now, I'm not even at Kaveri, but the team is thriving and, executing and implementing so many more initiatives to the day. So really proud of the work that happened.
Yeah. I'm one of the users of those initiatives. I can book appointments. I can actually know what is where and everything. I mean, I know what.
Yes.
I mean, it's a whole multi-channel approach. Kudos to you on that, Deeksha. I think wonderful it is.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think the realization was that we didn't need complex tech. We just needed to get the basics right was the fundamental of it, right? Like something as simple as enabling, communication through WhatsApp for the invoices and the basic things that you need. Right now, we're taking it for granted. But that time in 2020, when I came in and was doing, it was not this, common for you to like access everything through WhatsApp, for example. So it was just the basic things, but I think that tremendously moved the needle on patient experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also very impressed that you have taken your personal, change to use that as your key driver. And of course, helps to have a major problem statement to solve for. But I think it's a great career arc, Deeksha.
Yeah.
And this is also the time that you've taken the second MBA in Wharton after Kozhikode.
Yes.
Both are full-time. I have never heard anybody do this. I know a lot of people do first MBA right after they finish their college.
Yeah.
And that they could do actually full-time. Personally, I have done, executive MBA as a part-time after my, started working. So what motivated you to do that? I know Wharton is a very, marquee name, no two ways about it, but what made you do this?
Yeah, I think for me, it was mainly two reasons. One, my privilege that I could actually afford to do it, right, with regards to financial commitments and etc. Because that's a major aspect for anyone. For me, that wasn't there that I could self-fund the MBA that I needed to do. So the primary motivation for me was while I was at the hospital, I really enjoyed working on solving for patient experience. But I also realized that at a hospital, ultimately you're trying to solve for bringing patients to the hospital because the business makes sense only if the patients are in the hospital. So your occupancy rates, increasing your average revenue per occupied bed, these were the metrics that moves the needle as a business. And so I wanted to start something on my own where the business metric in itself was driven by patient experience. And I wanted to have the freedom to sort of explore on that. So I essentially wanted to start something on my own. But what it was not something I knew. And I wasn't sure whether India was the right place to start because, again, this was the time during COVID, a lot of healthcare startups came and died, right? And it was all on tech. So a lot of people were trying to solve for healthcare problems through tech. But they also quickly realized that, you cannot just introduce a technology and try to change something the way it's done, right? Like there is a reason why something exists the way it is. And so without actually getting into the problem itself, just by introducing a technology from out in was not going to move things. And I had the privilege to understand that because like the rise and fall of startups, digital health startups happened while I was at Kaveri, right? Like there was a huge inflow of, everyone getting funded and like so many, tech startups of, remote monitoring and like AI in healthcare and like, every single problem in healthcare was trying to be solved through technology and they were all getting funded, but they could never get the adoption needed because they weren't, they didn't understand the actual process of what was happening and what was needed. And so they weren't hand in glove with the process. When they tried to introduce something from outside in, it wasn't making sense. So I was at a time where startups tried but weren't actually functioning great in healthcare, even when they were trying to solve for patient experience, etc. And so I also realized that US healthcare market was something that was very different with regards to the scale of healthcare startups that were there. So I wanted to have the freedom to explore a startup idea and be geography agnostic with regards to my choice and do what was right with my ability to build a business. And so I felt doing that while doing an MBA would be the best use of my time because any startup founder you speak to would tell you that, listen, like don't jump into something before you have all your cards set, right? Like you typically continue a role that you're doing and like figure it out before like jumping all in to see if an idea is worth jumping into. So I didn't want to, not do something, especially if I'm trying to explore for the US. I needed to understand that market better as well. And I needed an in into the US market. And an MBA felt the best way to do that. And the reason I went for a 2-year MBA, not a 1-year MBA, was because 1-year MBA is typically actually only 10 months. It's not even a year. And I felt if I had to have the freedom to explore multiple ideas and see what works, I needed more time. And so I decided to do a 2-year MBA. And I used my MBA as a ground to experiment and explore on healthcare ideas that I can start up on. So even my current venture, I came across this while I was at Wharton doing my MBA. During my first year, I was trying to figure out what to do during my summers. And I met an investor who was interested in the idea that I was pursuing. And so that's how even my current startup sort of fell in place. Actually, there's an interesting story. Since my entire objective of going to Wharton was to start a business. And by the way, within 3 months of going to Wharton, I realized I can't start in the US because my entire understanding of what US healthcare market is and what I can contribute and do, I was like poles apart of what I could be and what is needed versus where I was. And there were enough and more people who were at a much better situation than me to figure out what to start there, right? So I felt my strength and everything lay in India. So within the first 3 months, I realized, okay, I need to figure out only in the Indian market. But once I figured and once I started, once I got funded, the entire purpose of me doing an MBA abroad was solved. And so my second year, I didn't spend an entire year. I essentially did all my credits in one term. so that I could finish my MBA in 1.5 years instead of 2. So I graduated in December 2023, earlier than my batchmates who all graduated in May 2024, because for me, my objective of doing my MBA was met. So I just wanted to finish and take it to the finish line. And so I was building the startup in parallel while doing my, all my credits during my second term. And so been building BabyMD full time since Jan 2024 after graduating from Wharton.
Wow, fantastic. Talk to me more about identifying investors, Deeksha. A lot of the entrepreneurs, particularly women entrepreneurs, have this as a major stumbling block. I mean, not only presenting their ideas, taking the idea to a point where an external investor, not a family or a friend, external investor is, ready to accept that this makes sense. How did you go about doing it?
Yeah, I think this is where all the credentials help, right? With regards to, it might be fair or unfair, but to the world, I'm signaling my quality with the credentials that I have, with regards to the roles that I've held and with regards to the institutes I've been part of. So I cross a barrier there itself with regards to trust that, okay, this person will know what they're doing because they seem to be smart enough to have gone to say what and etc. Right? So one barrier for me, I've crossed because of that. And the second barrier of talking to the right people, again, this opens up networks to talk. For example, my investor is a Wharton alum who I wasn't even looking to raise investment. I had reached out to him because he's also in healthcare, but on the investment side. And so I just wanted to connect as a Wharton alum to alum, to just, have as a network, right? But as we got to talking, we realized, both of us are pursuing the same concept and idea. And so then why not, partner? And so then he decided to just invest in me that way, right? So the network definitely helps. But also this is what they end up teaching you in your MBA, right? With regards to what is it that's needed to go convince an investor. Because you need to show certain things to investors. A, that there is a problem to solve for. B, that problem is big enough to solve for, right? Not all problems are worth solving, right? Because if you have to make a business out of it, the problem needs to have a scale. And C, that you're the right person to solve that problem, right? The problem might exist. It might be big enough, but are you the right person with the right capability? Like, do you have a unique industry insight that others may not have that's going to help you solve it better than 10 other people who are going to be trying the same idea? Because if something has been identified by someone, trust me when I say that 10 other people would have identified it, right? If no one else has identified it, it's not a problem worth solving because it's not going to be big enough. And if it's big enough, 10 other people would have thought of it, right? And it's a part of the game. We have to accept. We cannot expect and hope that we'll be the only one trying to solve for it. The idea is to solve it faster and better than anyone else trying to solve for it. So when we go to investors, I would say these are the 3 things that you should be able to articulate. What is the problem that you're solving for? You need to be very clear on the problem statement, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have a vague idea of a business, but when we go deeper into, what customer problem is it solving? We don't get a clear answer, right? We're like, no, but this adds value, not enough. It has to solve a concrete problem. It has to be a big enough problem to solve, and you should be the right person to solve that problem.
Wow, excellent, Deeksha. I'm sure whoever is listening will also it'll be useful for them to understand identifying channels, identifying, unique value prop, and all of that is a cherry on cake rather than the actually everything else. Deeksha, I know you are also one of the few people who are being a trustee. I know you started it right before COVID. For pediatric oncologists. So are you continuing to play that part? And I know you've done a lot of volunteering across your career. How is the volunteering work, come about with your corporate work, and how do you balance that?
Sure. I think for me, I was always involved in extracurricular work in the sense that, like, I'm a dancer and I was involved in dance. And during my college days and, when I was working as well, I was always a part of, some sort of activity that way. So I always had that time allotted to do something beyond my work. And like I shared before, it was after that personal change in my life that I wanted to use that time to do something more meaningful, where for me, I wanted to have some purpose that was beyond me. right? I wanted to think about something else that was beyond me and that is bigger than me. And so that's when I got into, more deeper into volunteering, I would say. And I think for me, of course, like everyone else, I also contribute to different NGOs on a yearly basis based on my capacity and stuff. But beyond that, I wanted to do something that I could only do or something. And so I stuck to pediatric oncology because even now I'm in the pediatric space, right? So I felt, pediatrics as a space is something I wanted to solve for both from a business side as well as on a social angle. And this was a very clear need. I had the patients already available, in my dad's hospital. They had the need yearly, right? I did not or could not, I didn't have enough bandwidth to scale it beyond the patients who are coming to, my father's hospital. But at least there, every year, we collect almost 50 lakhs from different high net worth individuals to fund the treatment costs of around 30 to 40 kids a year. And so that's been happening on a yearly basis. And I've been continuing that. And I feel that sort of gives me the satisfaction, but also doesn't take too much of my time because the whole thing is in the space that I'm interested in. But yeah.
I think I have to note this. I don't know whether you agree. See, if you're fundraising for your volunteering area, and moment you do that, that brings a lot of confidence innately to say, hey, I can do this. I'll know some of the soft skills, right? Being articulative, being confident, and just addressing the goodness of somebody. I think, see, at the end of the day, it's a bet that you're taking. See, anybody actually doing a volunteering also actually are taking a bet. Some of them could be short bet, some of them could be long bet. So I think I've always believed in volunteering and actually contributing in the social space helps tremendously in the rest of your your own mental mind as well as your corporate life tremendously, because one actually makes it much better the other.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that's also the reason, there are so many things to do in the world. Not everyone can do everything, right? And so I think for me, interest was children. And so sort of, everything, anything I'm doing socially or business-wise as well, sort of revolves around it. And I think my father being a pediatrician, I just grew up with it and this became my comfort zone of, operation that way. But you're absolutely right in the sense when you say that people take a bet on the person, right? Especially if it's early stage, where your idea has not matured. If it is later stage, then you're betting on the business, right? You already have the numbers. You're going to put it on Excel spreadsheet and you're going to do all your projections and you're going to do. But in an early stage, you don't know how it's going to do, right? So it's a bet on the person that, okay, they're going to figure out, they have what it takes to do what needs to be done. And that doesn't come only from your business skills, right? That comes from, okay, they've gone beyond their core business and they're a multifaceted personality. It's also something like a signal to anyone who's trusting you with their money that, okay, this person is capable of doing more than one thing at a time. And they've sort of proven it in, XYZ ways.
It's extremely endearing. I'm so happy that we're talking about this, Deeksha. Any advice that you would want to share for youngsters who are wanting to be entrepreneurs or wanting to even shift their business skill, their area of business? I think you have done it so wonderfully well. Any advice that you want to
I've done it too many times. I keep telling everyone my career growth is like this. Because I keep jumping different industries and there is no growth like this for me. I'm a very horizontal growth person. But yeah, my advice to anyone for entrepreneurship, let me answer that part first, is at least I had this bias, right? I had this bias that you needed to be a very creative person to be able to have that spark moment of saying, oh, I want to solve for this. And I have an idea and I'm so passionate about it and I will go solve for it, right? And so I was always thinking that, oh, if and when I get an idea like that, I will, start. But until then, I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. But it's absolutely not that way, right? Entrepreneurship itself can be a very planned journey. And your passion can be towards entrepreneurship rather than to an idea, right? And all the stories so far, we've seen that, right? You have multiple time founders and they're Like their industry itself might be different, like the first time to second time, etc., what they do and everything. And it's essentially a passion to wanting to solve for something, to wanting to build something from scratch. And the ideation also, I've realized, is a very structured analytical process, right? You start with 10 ideas, you identify by speaking to people, by researching, you start with 10, you narrow down, and then you take one that seems to have the most potential. And that you take, and you don't immediately jump in, right? You don't immediately jump in saying, okay, now I have an idea, I'm going to quit my job, let me go race, right? No, you start by running small experiments to validate whether what you're thinking is actually, what is happening. Because when you speak, what people tell versus how they act are two very different things, right? And there are so many ways you can run these small scale experiments just to validate your hypothesis, right? If you have an hypothesis that, okay, I'm going to solve this problem and it's going to make money this way, what are some of the core assumptions that are needed for this, entire business to make sense? And just run small hypotheses on these, assumptions, just to validate that, listen, I know that it will work. All I need now is for it to set up on scale, etc. But fundamentally, I've validated it, right? So entrepreneurship is more an analytical, structured thinking process rather than a haphazard and creative process, is something I've definitely realized. And for anyone hoping to jump in, I would also urge them to, even if they have a crazy idea that they're really passionate about, take it step by step with regards to, doing it small scale before going all in is what I would say. And I think your second one was anyone looking to shift industries and careers that way, right? Yeah, so this is something I'm still honestly grappling with. I don't know if you've read this book called Range, which essentially touts for being a generalist. They say that, being a specialist is overrated. And the more things you do and the wider your knowledge, the better you become at, core skills like problem solving and critical thinking, because your expertise is not in the domain. It's in these fundamental aspects. And ultimately, that's what is needed as a business leader, is what the book says. And I hope to go by that book because I'm a core generalist. I don't have any specific, as a specialist. And if you're looking to jump roles, I think it's mainly, looking at these skills. But whether that's what is valued in market is honestly something I'm still trying to figure out. I think if you're becoming an entrepreneur, that's the best thing you can do for yourself, because then you hire the specialists across different ones and you have enough knowledge to at least know whether they're doing a good job or not. But yeah, whether the market values that is something out for debate.
Absolutely. Given the Gen AI happening, right? This is the age of AI,
Yeah.
whether it's just Gen or not. But your skills, you ought to learn new skills. And if needed, move. I think that inertia, we have to just do. I think that's really where we are. Thank you so much, Deeksha. I think this has been a very, very wonderful conversation. I loved every bit of it.
It was lovely speaking and sharing all of this. And I hope everyone got a bit of something that they can take away from my journey that I shared.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
please subscribe on your favorite podcast client
and spread the word in your network.
If you'd like to share your story,
contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.